Why does a woman exile herself to 8,000 feet of frozen isolation when she was once considered among the most promising snipers the Marine Corps had ever seen? Sarah Morgan stood on her cabin porch that February morning, steam rising from her coffee mug into air so cold it burned the lungs. 29 years old, auburn hair falling past her shoulders, free from regulations for the first time in 8 years. The Barrett rifle leaning against the cabin wall, always within reach, always loaded. 3 years she'd been living here, 3 years since they'd called her a disgrace, a liability, the Marine who cost lives. But here's the thing about exile. It doesn't erase muscle memory. It doesn't quiet the instincts that wake you at dawn, scanning valleys for movement that shouldn't be there. It doesn't make you forget how to calculate wind drift at 1,200 meters or the exact pressure needed on a trigger to send a bullet exactly where it needs to go. The Devil's Backbone Mountains stretched below her, their peaks catching the pale moonlight like broken teeth. Beautiful, deadly, perfect. She'd chosen this cabin for tactical reasons. 3 escape routes, clear fields of fire in every direction, enough warning time to disappear if anyone came looking for the disgraced Marine who'd once been promised a career that mattered. Some habits die harder than others. Movement below, a figure emerging from the tree line, climbing with the deliberate efficiency of someone who understood mountain survival. Arthur Martinez, 68 years old, retired Army Ranger, her closest neighbor, though he lived 4 miles away down a path most people couldn't navigate in daylight. "Coffee still hot," she called down. Art reached her porch, breathing steady despite the altitude, despite the darkness, despite being old enough to be her father. "Figured you'd be up," he said, wrapping calloused fingers around the mug she handed him. "Heard helicopters about an hour ago, heading northeast toward Devil's Backbone Valley." Sarah's posture straightened, old instincts. "Military birds," Art continued. "Navy, multiple aircraft flying low and fast." Her mind processed automatically. Multiple helicopters, Navy designation, low-altitude approach, pre-dawn timing. That wasn't a training exercise. They sat in silence, watching snow accumulate on the pine branches below. Art had never asked about her military service beyond what she'd volunteered. She'd never pressed him for details about the missions that left him with that pronounced limp, those shrapnel scars visible on his forearms. Their friendship had developed through mutual respect for privacy, through shared understanding of what it meant to carry invisible wounds from service most people couldn't comprehend. But there was something Art had never told her, not completely. Gulf War 1991, Operation Desert Storm, 43 confirmed kills over 6 weeks, then Somalia 93, Black Hawk Down. He'd pulled 3 wounded soldiers out of the kill zone while taking shrapnel to his leg and back. The physical wounds had healed. The others never did. Iraq 2008. His son David Martinez, 23 years old, Marine Corps lieutenant, killed when his convoy hit an IED outside Fallujah. Art had trained that boy since childhood, taught him everything about survival and warfare, and still couldn't save him from a bomb buried in desert sand 5,000 miles away. After David's death, Art had retreated to these mountains, seeking isolation from a world that kept taking the things he loved. Then 3 years ago he'd found Sarah stumbling through a blizzard, drunk, hypothermic, a loaded pistol in her jacket pocket and death in her eyes. He'd carried her back to his cabin, sobered her up, made her a promise. "I lost my son. I won't lose another kid, not on my watch." "You ever miss it?" Art asked now, nodding toward the Barrett. Sarah considered the question, studied those distant peaks where the helicopters had disappeared. "I miss the certainty," she said finally, "knowing exactly what your mission was, what success looked like, who you could trust to have your back." Her jaw tightened. "But not the politics, Not when the mission parameters change after you're already committed, when the intelligence turns out to be fabricated, when your own command structure becomes the enemy. Art understood. He'd been there himself decades ago, when operational realities conflicted with political narratives and good soldiers paid the price for institutional failures. 3 years earlier, Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Morgan had been leading a reconnaissance team in a classified operation that officially never happened. The intelligence had been perfect, the mission parameters clear, the tactical situation straightforward. Eliminate a high-value target, coordinating arms shipments to terrorist organizations. One shot, one kill, mission complete. Except the target had been an undercover CIA asset, whose identity had been deliberately concealed from military commanders. Sarah's successful completion of her assigned mission had eliminated a key intelligence source, compromised an ongoing operation worth millions of dollars and countless lives. The subsequent investigation painted her as a rogue operator who exceeded her authority, who ignored proper verification protocols. The truth, buried beneath layers of classified documents and political maneuvering, was simpler. Sarah had followed orders exactly as given by commanders who'd been deliberately kept uninformed about CIA operations in the same area. She'd become the perfect scapegoat for an intelligence failure that reached the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. Her discharge had been swift, quiet, and carried implications that made finding civilian employment virtually impossible. The Marine Corps she'd served with distinction for 8 years had erased her existence as efficiently as she'd once eliminated targets through a rifle scope. Sometimes I think about what I could have done differently, Sarah continued, her gaze still fixed on distant mountains. But every scenario leads to the same conclusion. I was set up to fail from the beginning. Art nodded slowly. Anger's useful, he said, keeps you sharp, but it'll eat you alive if you let it. I'm not angry anymore, Sarah replied, and she almost believed it. The satellite phone inside her cabin began ringing. Sarah froze. That phone had been silent for 3 years. 3 years of chosen isolation. 3 years of no contact with anyone from her former life. Art met her eyes, something unspoken passing between them. She rose slowly, walked inside, picked up the phone with hands that had steadied under fire in 6 different countries but trembled now. Morgan, she said. The voice on the other end was familiar, unwelcome. Colonel James Stone, her former commanding officer, the man who'd signed her discharge papers without meeting her eyes. Phantom, he said, using her old call sign, we need you. Sarah's laugh was bitter. You need me. That's interesting, Colonel, considering 3 years ago you needed me gone badly enough to destroy my career. Sarah, listen to me. I listened to you once. It cost me everything. 24 Navy SEALs are surrounded in Devil's Backbone Valley, Stone said, his voice tight. Over 150 armed hostiles, international arms dealers, mercenaries. Every available sniper is either dead, wounded, or pinned down by heavy fire. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. Not my problem. One of those SEALs is Marcus Rivers, Stone continued. His father was Tom Rivers, Army Ranger, served with Art Martinez in Desert Storm. Tom saved Art's life in Kuwait City. Sarah's eyes found Art through the window. He was still sitting on the porch, staring at those mountains where the helicopters had gone. But there was something in his posture now, something rigid. How do you know about Art? Sarah asked quietly. Because Art called me, Stone said. 30 minutes ago, asked me to ask you, said it was time to stop hiding. Sarah stepped back onto the porch. Art turned to face her. His father saved my life, Art said simply. Tom Rivers took 3 bullets meant for me in Kuwait City, died in my arms. His voice cracked. I made a promise to watch over his son, Marcus doesn't even know me, doesn't know the debt I owe, but I know. He stood, moving closer. I found you in that blizzard 3 years ago because I needed a purpose, needed someone to save since I couldn't save my own boy. You gave me that. You let me keep my promise to myself. His hand gripped her shoulder. Now I'm asking you to help me keep a promise to a dead friend. Those SEALs down there, they're someone's sons, someone's daughters. They're not politics. They're not intelligence failures. They're just kids trying to do their job. Sarah looked at the Barrett rifle, then at the mountains, then at Art. Stone, she said into the phone, what's the tactical situation? What she didn't know yet was that this mission would take exactly 73 minutes. 42 precisely placed shots from positions military tacticians had deemed impossible to reach. What she didn't know was that everything the Pentagon thought they knew about mountain warfare was about to change. What she didn't know was that redemption doesn't announce itself. It simply waits, in frozen mountains, in impossible shots, in the moment you choose to stop hiding and remember who you were before they tried to erase you. Stone's voice came through crisp and urgent. SEALs inserted 12 hours ago for a raid on a suspected arms cache. Intelligence indicated minimal resistance. They walked into an ambush. The entire valley is a kill box now. Sarah's mind shifted, combat mode engaging like a switch flipping. Terrain. Devil's Backbone Valley. Narrow canyon, steep walls, limited cover. Hostiles have high ground on both sides. SEALs are pinned in the valley floor. Weather. Snowstorm moving in, visibility decreasing, wind gusting to 40 miles per hour. Perfect conditions for what most people would call impossible. For Sarah, it was just another Tuesday. How long do they have? Stone's pause told her everything. Ammunition's critical. They've got maybe 2 hours before they're overrun. Air support can't get through the weather. QRF is 3 hours out minimum. Send me the coordinates, Sarah said. And Stone, this doesn't change anything between us. Understood, but Sarah, if you pull this off. She ended the call. Art was already moving toward his truck, despite the limp, despite the scars, despite being 68 years old and having no business on a battlefield. You're not coming, Sarah said. The hell I'm not. Art. I know these mountains better than anyone alive, he said firmly. I know routes to firing positions that don't exist on any map. You want to save those kids. You need me. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to protect this man who'd saved her life, who'd given her purpose when she had nothing left. But he was right. 20 minutes later, they were loaded into Art's modified truck, chains on the tires, climbing switchbacks that would terrify most drivers in daylight. Sarah wore her ghillie suit for the first time in 3 years, the Barrett secured in its case, 200 rounds of match-grade ammunition, range finder, weather meter, emergency medical kit. The tools of her trade, the tools she'd sworn she'd never use again. Art drove in silence, navigating by memory through snow that was falling harder now. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up. There's something you should know, he said finally, about that mission 3 years ago, the one that got you discharged. Sarah's stomach tightened. The CIA asset you eliminated. He wasn't innocent. He was running guns to the same terrorists he was supposed to be infiltrating, playing both sides. Your commanders knew. They just needed someone to take the fall when it went public. How do you know this? Because I still have friends. Friends who owe me favors. Friends who knew what they did to you was wrong but couldn't speak up without destroying their own careers. Art's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. You weren't a scapegoat by accident, Sarah. You were chosen specifically because you were good enough to trust, young enough to be expendable, and isolated enough that nobody would fight for you. The words should have triggered anger, rage. Instead, Sarah felt something colder, clearer. Certainty. Why didn't you tell me before? Because you weren't ready to hear it. You needed time to grieve, to heal, to remember that you're more than what they tried to make you. He glanced at her. But now you need to know that every shot you fired in your career was righteous. Every mission was executed perfectly. The only failure was theirs, not yours. They reached the base of Devil's Backbone Valley as dawn began breaking through the storm clouds. Art parked in a concealed position, killed the engine. Position Alpha, he said, pointing to a granite outcropping 2,000 feet up the western ridge. Impossible climb in this weather, which means nobody's watching it. Give you clear sight lines down the entire valley. Sarah studied the rock face through binoculars, sheer cliff, ice-covered, wind howling across exposed sections. That's a suicide climb. For most people, not for you. He pulled out a hand-drawn map, detailed topographical markings showing routes and positions that definitely didn't exist in any military database. I've been mapping these mountains for 40 years, spent the last 3 mapping them specifically for you. Sarah looked at him sharply. You knew this day would come. I hoped it would come, Art corrected. Hoped you'd get a chance to show them what they threw away. He handed her the map. 7 positions. Each one gives you different angles, different ranges, different tactical advantages. You rotate between them, you'll be a ghost. They'll never pin you down. Sarah felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope maybe, or purpose. Or maybe just the cold clarity of knowing exactly what needed to be done. She checked her gear one final time. Barrett M82A1. 10-round magazine. Match grade .50 BMG rounds loaded with precision that bordered on obsessive. Each round capable of defeating body armor at 1,500 meters. Each round carrying enough kinetic energy to change the course of a battle. Radio check, she said into her comm unit. Stone's voice came through immediately. Phantom, we read you 5 by 5. What's the current situation? Hostiles are advancing. SEALs have taken casualties. We're running out of time. Sarah shouldered her rifle case, looked at Art one last time. If I don't make it back. You'll make it back, Art said firmly. Because you're the best I've ever seen. Better than me. Better than anyone who's ever climbed these mountains with a rifle. He gripped her shoulder. Now go remind them why they called you Phantom. The climb to position Alpha took 47 minutes. 47 minutes of vertical ascent in conditions that would kill most climbers. Ice cracking under her boots. Wind trying to tear her from the rock face. Muscles screaming from exertion in thin mountain air. But Sarah had trained for this. Had spent 3 years climbing these mountains, building strength, endurance, preparing for a mission she'd told herself would never come. Art had known better. She reached the outcropping as the storm intensified, set up her position with practiced efficiency. Bipod deployed, scope covers removed, range finder calibrated. Through the scope, Devil's Backbone Valley materialized in brutal clarity. 24 Navy SEALs pinned in a depression that offered minimal cover, bodies of their fallen comrades visible in the snow. Ammunition running critical, fighting against odds that should have already killed them. Surrounding them over 150 hostiles, international arms dealers, mercenaries, professional killers who knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't some ragtag insurgent force. This was organized, well-equipped, coordinated. Someone had set this up. Someone had leaked the SEAL team's insertion point. Someone had wanted American Special Operations Forces dead. And Sarah was about to make them regret it. She keyed her radio. Phantom to Overwatch, I have eyes on, beginning threat assessment. Stone's voice, copy Phantom, rules of engagement. Sarah's finger traced along her trigger guard, muscle memory, mathematics, wind calculations appearing in her mind like equations written in snow. There are no rules in a kill box, Colonel. There's just survival. She took a breath, let it out slowly, found her first target. A mercenary with an RPG, positioned on the eastern ridge, preparing to fire into the SEAL position. Range 1,247 meters, wind gusting northeast at 38 miles per hour, temperature dropping, barometric pressure falling. Her finger moved to the trigger. And somewhere in those frozen mountains, a disgraced Marine remembered exactly who she was. The first shot broke the silence at 6:47 hours. Range 1,247 meters. Target hostile with RPG positioned on the eastern ridge. The .50 caliber round traveled for 1.8 seconds before impact. By the time the sound reached the valley floor, the hostile was already falling, the RPG launcher tumbling from dead hands into the ravine below. The SEALs didn't know where the shot came from. The hostiles didn't know where the shot came from. That was the point. Sarah cycled the bolt, smooth, mechanical, the brass casing ejecting in a practiced rhythm that felt like coming home after a long exile. Target 2, Western Ridge. Sniper in position overlooking the SEAL defensive perimeter. He'd already killed 2 Americans, was lining up a third. Range 1,384 meters. Uphill shot, wind quartering from the right. Sarah adjusted, breath fired. The hostile sniper's rifle scope exploded a microsecond before the round continued through his skull. He never knew what hit him. Phantom to Overwatch, Sarah transmitted. 2 threats eliminated, continuing. Stone's voice carried something she hadn't heard in 3 years. Respect. Copy Phantom. SEAL team reports enemy confusion. Keep up the pressure. Sarah was already moving. Art's map memorized. Position Beta was 400 meters north, a different angle, a different range profile. She climbed like a ghost. No wasted movement, no hesitation. The mountain wasn't her enemy, it was her ally, her advantage, her weapon. Position Beta offered a clear view of the valley's southern approach, where hostiles were attempting to flank the pinned SEALs. 4 targets, moving in tactical formation, professional, disciplined. Sarah settled into her new position, calculated ranges. Wind had shifted, storm intensifying. Good. The worse the conditions, the less likely anyone would believe a single sniper could operate effectively. First target, range 892 meters, lead man in the flanking element. The round took him in the upper chest. The body armor that should have saved him might as well have been paper against a .50 BMG traveling at 2,800 feet per second. His squad scattered, seeking cover that didn't exist from a shooter they couldn't locate. Second target, trying to drag his dead leader to safety. Noble, brave, dead. Range 911 meters, moving target, wind gusting. Sarah led him by 3 feet, fired. He went down clutching his shoulder, not a kill shot, deliberate. Because wounded enemies create more problems than dead ones, require medical attention, tie up resources, spread fear. The mathematics of warfare aren't pretty, but they're effective. Third and fourth targets broke from cover, running for better positions. Sarah fired twice in rapid succession, both rounds finding their marks within seconds. Phantom to Overwatch, southern approach neutralized, SEAL team should have breathing room. Down in that valley, Master Chief Marcus Rivers watched in disbelief as hostiles who'd had them pinned for 6 hours started dying from impossible angles. "Who the hell is that?" one of his men shouted over the chaos. Marcus didn't know, but whoever it was had just saved their lives. Sarah moved again. Position Gamma, higher elevation, longer ranges, more exposure to the wind that was now screaming across the mountain at 45 miles per hour. Through her scope, she watched the hostile forces reorganizing, watched them trying to locate her, watched them fail. 3 years of exile, 3 years of being told she was a disgrace, a failure, a liability. But up here in these frozen mountains, with a rifle in her hands and mathematics in her mind, Sarah Morgan was exactly what she'd always been. Lethal, precise, unstoppable. Target 7 appeared on the northern ridge, heavy machine gun position, pouring fire into the SEAL defensive line, keeping heads down, preventing any movement. Range 1,643 meters, extreme distance, wind unpredictable, target partially concealed. This was the shot that separated good snipers from legends. Sarah calculated, adjusted, breathed. The round took almost 2 full seconds to reach target, long enough to doubt, long enough to second guess. But Sarah didn't doubt. The machine gunner's head snapped back. The weapon went silent. The SEAL team immediately capitalized on the reprieve, repositioning, consolidating their defensive line. "Phantom, this is actual," a new voice came through her radio, Marcus Rivers himself. "I don't know who you are, but you just gave us our lives back." Sarah didn't respond, didn't need the distraction, didn't need the gratitude. She needed targets. Position Delta, even higher now, exposed to elements that would freeze exposed skin in minutes, but offering sight lines that covered approaches Art had marked as critical. 15 minutes into the engagement, Sarah had eliminated 9 hostiles, wounded 3 more, completely disrupted the enemy's tactical coordination. They were scared now, looking over shoulders, questioning whether to advance, whether to hold, whether any position was truly safe from this invisible angel of death in the mountains. But Sarah wasn't an angel. She was a Marine who'd been told she didn't matter, who'd been erased, discarded, abandoned. And she was reminding everyone exactly what they'd thrown away. Through her scope, movement caught her attention. A figure in the valley, different from the others, moving with authority, coordinating, commanding. The leader. Range 1,521 meters, partially obscured, moving between covered positions. Sarah tracked him, patient, waiting for the moment, waiting for the mistake everyone eventually makes. There. 3 seconds of exposure as he moved between rocks to redirect his forces. Sarah's finger compressed the trigger with exactly 4.2 pounds of pressure. The round found him center mass. He went down hard, his forces immediately disorganized without leadership. "Phantom to Overwatch," Sarah transmitted. "Enemy commander eliminated, hostile forces losing cohesion." "Copy Phantom, QRF is now 90 minutes out. Air support attempting to navigate the storm. Can you hold?" Could she hold? Sarah looked at her remaining ammunition, looked at the hostiles still in the valley, looked at the SEALs who were alive because she'd chosen to climb a frozen mountain in a blizzard. "Affirm Overwatch, I can hold." But something was changing. The hostiles were adapting, setting up counter-sniper positions, trying to triangulate her location based on muzzle flash and shot timing. Smart. But Art had taught her better. Position Echo, lower elevation, different angle, completely unexpected. She climbed down 600 feet in conditions that should have been suicide, boots finding purchase on ice-covered rock, hands gripping ledges that crumbled under pressure, the Barrett strapped to her back, 40 pounds of precision, engineering threatening to pull her off the mountain with every movement. But Sarah had spent 3 years preparing for this. 3 years building strength in isolation. 3 years climbing these mountains until she knew every route, every handhold, every position. Art had mapped the mountains, but Sarah had become part of them. Position Echo offered something the others hadn't. Close-range precision. The ability to engage targets that were too close to the SEAL defensive line for long-range fire. Through her scope, she identified 3 hostiles attempting to work their way through a gully that would put them within grenade range of the Americans. Range 387 meters, close enough to see their faces, close enough to watch them die. Sarah had killed at extreme range for most of her career. Clean, distant, mathematical. This was different, this was personal. She fired 3 times in 8 seconds. 3 hostiles down, 3 men who would never go home. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah felt the weight of it. Not guilt, she'd done nothing wrong. These were armed combatants trying to kill American soldiers. But weight nonetheless. The understanding that every trigger pull changed the universe in small, irreversible ways. That someone, somewhere, would grieve these men. That killing, even justified killing, extracted a cost that never fully healed. Art had tried to teach her this, had tried to explain that the best warriors were the ones who understood the price. Now in these frozen mountains, executing precision fire in a blizzard, Sarah finally understood. Phantom, Marcus Rivers' voice came through strained with urgency. Hostiles are pulling back, regrouping on the western ridge. Looks like they're preparing for a final push. Sarah shifted to position Foxtrot. Higher again, different angle covering the western approach. What she saw made her blood run cold. The hostiles weren't just regrouping. They were preparing something bigger, vehicle-mounted heavy weapons being positioned, coordinated assault formations. This wasn't a ragtag ambush anymore. This was professional military tactics. Someone with serious training was down there. Someone who knew how to counter a sniper. Someone who understood that if they could overwhelm the SEAL position with sheer firepower, one shooter in the mountains wouldn't matter. Sarah keyed her radio. Overwatch, be advised. Hostiles are preparing for a major assault. Vehicle-mounted weapons. Coordinated attack. This is bigger than an arms deal gone wrong. Stone's response carried tension. She'd never heard from him. Phantom, intelligence just came through. One of the hostiles is Colonel Victor Mansfield, former Army Special Forces, dishonorably discharged 5 years ago for selling classified intelligence. He's been operating as a military contractor for international arms dealers. Sarah's jaw clenched. He knows SEAL tactics, he knows American doctrine, and he knows exactly how to kill your team. Through her scope, Sarah found him, Mansfield, directing his forces with the precision of someone who'd spent decades in uniform. A traitor, an American who'd sold out his brothers for money. Something cold settled in Sarah's chest, something that went beyond mission parameters or rules of engagement. This was personal. Range to Mansfield, 1,892 meters, extreme distance, wind howling, snow reducing visibility. The shot that would end this. The shot that would save those SEALs. The shot that would prove she was exactly who she'd always been. Sarah's finger found the trigger. Her breathing slowed. The world contracted to the space between her heartbeat and the distance to target. But something made her pause. Movement behind Mansfield, a figure she recognized. Another American, Captain Owen Park, combat medic attached to the SEAL team. He'd been captured during the initial ambush. Mansfield was using him as a shield. Sarah's heart rate spiked. The shot was there. She could take it, could punch through Park to eliminate Mansfield. Acceptable casualties, 1 to save 24. The mathematics made sense. But Art's voice echoed in her mind. A warrior's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, it's knowing when not to pull the trigger. Sarah lowered her weapon. Overwatch, I have a problem. 42 shots, 73 minutes, 24 lives hanging in the balance. And the one shot that mattered most was the one Sarah Morgan chose not to take. How do you kill the enemy when he's hiding behind one of your own? Sarah watched through her scope as Mansfield positioned Captain Owen Park directly in front of him, using the wounded medic as a human shield. Professional, calculated, the act of someone who understood exactly how American snipers operated. Someone who knew they wouldn't risk friendly casualties. "Phantom, what's your status?" Stone's voice carried urgency in her earpiece. "Target is using a friendly as cover," Sarah transmitted. "I don't have a clean shot." Down in the valley, Marcus Rivers' voice cut through. "That's Park. He's been treating our wounded for 6 hours. He's kept 3 men alive who should be dead. We don't leave him behind." Sarah's finger traced her trigger guard, calculating, thinking. 3 years ago, she'd taken a shot exactly as ordered. Eliminated a target that turned out to be an undercover asset, followed her mission parameters perfectly. And it had destroyed her career, her reputation, her life. Now she had another impossible choice. Take the shot and save 24 SEALs at the cost of 1 medic, or hold fire and risk everyone. The old Sarah would have taken the shot, would have trusted that command knew what they were doing, would have followed orders without question. But the old Sarah was dead, buried somewhere in 3 years of frozen exile. The woman on this mountain had learned that sometimes the right answer wasn't in the mission briefing. Sometimes you had to trust yourself over the system. "Negative on target elimination," Sarah said firmly. "I'm not killing an American to get to a traitor." Stone's voice: "Phantom, we're running out of time. QRF is still 60 minutes out. If Mansfield coordinates another assault, then I'll deal with it without killing our own people." Sarah shifted position. Moving to Foxtrot 2, a secondary location Art had marked on his map. Lower elevation, different angle, closer range. More dangerous, more exposed, but offering sight lines that might give her options. The climb down took 8 minutes. 8 minutes of Mansfield organizing his forces. 8 minutes of the SEALs burning through their last ammunition. 8 minutes of hopping she wasn't making a catastrophic mistake. Through her new position scope, Sarah studied the tactical situation with fresh eyes. Mansfield had positioned himself well, using Park as a shield, using rock formations as cover, making himself nearly impossible to engage without collateral damage. But nearly impossible wasn't the same as impossible. She keyed her radio. "Actual, this is Phantom. I need you to trust me." "Marcus Rivers, we've been trusting you for the last hour. You've kept us alive. What do you need?" "I need your best marksman to put rounds on the rock formation 15 meters north of Mansfield's position. Not to hit anything, just to make noise, make him move. You want us to waste ammunition on suppressive fire. I want you to create an opportunity. Can you do it?" "Silence, then. We can do it. On your mark." Sarah settled into her position. Range to Mansfield, 743 meters, close enough to see his face, close enough to watch him react. She found her breathing rhythm, calculated wind drift, barometric pressure, temperature. The mathematics that had defined her life. "Mark," she transmitted. SEAL rifles opened up, rounds pinging off rock formation. Not accurate, not meant to be, just noise, just chaos, just distraction. Mansfield flinched, shifted his position, pulled Park with him. For exactly 1.3 seconds, his shoulder cleared Park's body. Sarah fired. The round took Mansfield in the right shoulder, not a kill shot, deliberate, spinning him around, separating him from Park, sending his weapon clattering across frozen ground. "Target down," Sarah transmitted. "Park is clear." But the mission wasn't over. Mansfield's forces, seeing their commander wounded, made a decision. Some broke and ran, smart ones who understood the mathematics of a losing battle. Others, loyal or stupid or desperate, charged the SEAL position. Final assault, all or nothing. Sarah's rifle spoke 17 more times in the next 4 minutes. 17 rounds, 16 hostiles down. 1 round missing its mark by inches because the wind shifted and Sarah's cold-stiffened fingers were half a second slow on the trigger adjustment. The miss haunted her even as she acquired her next target. Because perfection mattered. because every round represented trust, because somewhere down there, Americans were alive only because she didn't miss. The SEAL defensive line held. Barely. Last stand desperation meeting precision sniper fire from a ghost in the mountains they couldn't see. And then it was over. The remaining hostiles broke, scattered, fleeing into the storm that had become their cover and their prison. "Phantom to Overwatch," Sarah transmitted, her voice steady despite lungs burning from altitude and exertion. "Valley is clear. Hostiles neutralized or retreated. SEAL team is secure." Stone's voice carried something she hadn't heard in 3 years, something she thought she'd never hear again. "Pride. Outstanding work, Phantom. QRF is 30 minutes out now. Air support is preparing for dust-off. You just saved 24 American lives." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She was watching through her scope as Marcus Rivers moved across the valley toward Mansfield's position. Watching as Owen Park, wounded but alive, was pulled to safety by his brothers. Watching as men she'd never met, would probably never meet, survived because she'd climbed a frozen mountain in a blizzard and remembered how to do the job she'd been trained for. "Phantom, did you copy?" "I copy, Overwatch, beginning exfiltration." But Sarah didn't move, not yet. Because something was wrong. Through her scope, she watched Mansfield, wounded, captured, being zip-tied by SEALs who had every reason to put a bullet in his head for treason. But there was someone else, another figure moving through the chaos, American gear, American weapons, moving with purpose toward the administrative building where intelligence had indicated the arms cache was stored. Sarah zoomed in, enhanced the scope's magnification. Her blood went cold. Captain Thomas Lockwood, intelligence officer attached to the SEAL team. She recognized him from the briefing materials Stone had transmitted. And he was moving like someone with a mission that had nothing to do with securing arms dealers. "Overwatch, we have a problem," Sarah transmitted. "Stand by." She tracked Lockwood through her scope, watched him enter the building, watched him emerge 3 minutes later carrying hard drives, classified data storage. Not securing evidence, stealing it. "Overwatch, Captain Lockwood just compromised intelligence materials from the target location. He's not securing evidence, he's stealing it." Stone's voice went sharp. "Say again, Phantom." "Lockwood is dirty. This whole operation was compromised from the beginning. Someone leaked the SEAL insertion point. Someone set up this ambush. And that someone is currently walking out of the target building with classified hard drives." Down in the valley, Marcus Rivers was already moving. He'd heard the transmission, understood immediately. "Lockwood," Marcus shouted, "step away from that vehicle." Lockwood froze, his hand moving toward his sidearm. Sarah's scope centered on him. Range, 681 meters, clear shot, no obstructions. But this wasn't like the others. This wasn't an arms dealer or mercenary. This was an American officer, someone who'd taken the same oath she had. Someone who'd betrayed it. Art's voice in her mind. Every shot has consequences that extend far beyond the target. "Lockwood, you're surrounded," Marcus called. "Put down your weapon, hand over those drives. We can do this easy or hard, your choice." For a moment, Lockwood seemed to consider it, seemed to weigh his options. Then his hand moved toward his pistol. Sarah's finger was already compressing the trigger. The round took Lockwood in the right shoulder, same shot she'd given Mansfield, not a kill, deliberate. Because unlike Lockwood, she still believed in justice over revenge. He went down, hard, weapon skittering across frozen ground. "Target secured," Sarah transmitted. "Lockwood is wounded but alive. Hard drives are recoverable." But something else was happening, something she hadn't anticipated. Movement in the administrative building, someone else emerging, young, terrified, hands raised. A girl, maybe 14 years old, civilian clothes, wrong place, Wrong time, wrong war. Sarah's scope found her, found the terror in her eyes, found the absolute understanding that this child had nothing to do with arms deals or betrayals or classified intelligence. Just a kid, caught in something bigger than she could understand. Overwatch, Sarah transmitted quietly. We have a civilian child at the target location, female, approximately 14 years old, appears to be. The girl ran, straight toward the valley's western exit, straight through the kill zone, straight into danger from SEALs who were still keyed up from combat. Sarah's scope tracked her, watched SEAL weapons following the movement, watched fingers on triggers. Hold fire, Marcus shouted. Civilian, hold your fire. But there was another threat. A hostile sniper Sarah hadn't eliminated, hidden in the rocks, wounded but alive, desperate, aiming at the running child. Sarah saw it all in the space between heartbeats. Saw the sniper, Russian, professional, someone she'd traded shots with earlier and failed to neutralize. Saw his scope tracking the girl. Saw his finger on the trigger. Range, 1,431 meters, wind quartering, target partially concealed, moving civilian between her and target. The shot that would define everything that came after. Sarah adjusted, breath fired. The Russian sniper's rifle dropped from dead hands. The girl kept running, kept living, kept being 14 years old in a war that had nothing to do with her. And somewhere in those frozen mountains, Sarah Morgan made a decision. Overwatch, that's my last shot. I'm Winchester exfiltrating now. She'd fired 42 rounds, in 73 minutes, from positions military tacticians had called impossible. But the shot that mattered most was the 42nd, the shot that saved a child, the shot that proved she was more than a killer with a rifle. She was a warrior who remembered her humanity. The climb down took 37 minutes, Sarah's muscles screaming, cold burning through layers of clothing, the Barrett strapped to her back feeling heavier with every meter. But she was alive. The SEALs were alive. Captain Park was alive. Even Mansfield and Lockwood were alive, breathing, facing justice instead of graves. Art was waiting at the base position, his truck running, coffee already poured. Heard the whole thing on radio, he said simply, handing her the steaming mug. You did good, kid. Sarah's hands shook as she wrapped them around the warmth, not from cold, not from fear, from the understanding that she'd just proven something to herself that 3 years of exile hadn't managed to erase. She was exactly who she'd always been, not a disgrace, not a liability, not a failure. A Marine, a sniper, a warrior who knew when to pull the trigger and when to show mercy. Art, she said quietly, that Russian sniper, the one aiming at the girl, I had him in my sights earlier, could have eliminated him, chose a different target instead. And I almost got that kid killed because of it. Art studied her face, saw the weight there, the understanding. You made 73 minutes of decisions under impossible conditions, he said firmly. You saved 24 Americans, stopped 2 traitors, prevented a massive intelligence breach, and you showed mercy to a child when you could have just focused on the mission. He gripped her shoulder. The fact that you're questioning yourself, that's what makes you different from them, that's what makes you better. 3 extraction helicopters appeared through the storm, Black Hawks, Navy designation, coming to collect their people. Stone's voice came through Sarah's radio one last time. Phantom, outstanding work. Intelligence assessment confirms those hard drives contain access codes for multiple classified networks. Lockwood and Mansfield were selling information to foreign powers. This operation prevented a catastrophic security breach. A pause. Full mission debrief in 72 hours. And Sarah, welcome back. But Sarah wasn't listening to Stone anymore. She was looking at the mountains, thinking about exile, about redemption, about second chances. Art, she said, When you found me in that blizzard 3 years ago, why didn't you just let me go? Art was quiet for a long moment, watching those helicopters land, watching SEALs loading their wounded brothers, watching the storm begin to clear. Because I lost my son, he said finally. Lost him to a war that didn't need him as much as I did. And when I found you up here, dying in the snow with death in your eyes, I saw a chance. He turned to face her. Not to replace David. Nothing could do that. But to honor his memory by saving someone else's kid. By keeping a promise to Tom Rivers that I'd watch over his son. By remembering that Rangers never leave anyone behind. Sarah felt tears burning, first time in 3 years. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, just promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll stop hiding. Stop punishing yourself for intelligence failures that were never your fault. Stop believing the lies they told you about who you are. Art's voice strengthened. You're not a disgrace. You're not a liability. You're a warrior who climbed a frozen mountain in a blizzard and saved 24 lives with 42 shots. You're someone who chose mercy when killing would have been easier. You're my daughter in every way that matters. Sarah pulled him into a hug, this man who'd saved her, who'd believed in her, who'd mapped these mountains for 3 years knowing that someday, somehow, she'd need them. I promise, she said. 3 months later. The Pentagon, dress blues, medals gleaming under lights that felt too bright after years of mountain isolation. The Secretary of Defense pinned the Medal of Honor to Sarah Morgan's uniform while Art Martinez, his arm in a sling from defending his cabin during a follow-up operation, watched with pride that transcended words. For extraordinary heroism and technical skill beyond measure, the citation read. Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Morgan's actions directly resulted in the preservation of 24 American lives and the prevention of a strategic intelligence compromise. 42 shots fired, 38 enemy combatants eliminated, 73 minutes of sustained precision fire under extreme environmental conditions, a record that will stand for generations. But Sarah wasn't thinking about records. She was thinking about that Russian sniper, about the choice to show mercy, about the girl who ran through the valley and lived. After the ceremony, Stone approached with an offer. Joint Counterterrorism Task Force, training position. We need someone who can teach the next generation what you demonstrated in those mountains. Sarah looked at the medal, then at Art, then back at Stone. I'll think about it, Colonel, but first I need to go home. I've got a cabin that needs repairs, a mountain that needs protecting, and an old ranger who needs someone to drink coffee with at dawn. Stone smiled, understanding. The offer stands when you're ready. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a classroom at Fort Bragg. 12 students, 4 of them women, all of them watching her with the intensity of people who understood that the knowledge she carried could save their lives someday. A sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, she told them, echoing Art's words. It's knowing when not to pull the trigger. It's understanding that every shot has consequences that extend far beyond the target. And it's accepting that sometimes the hardest shot to take is the one you choose not to fire. She looked at a photo on her desk. Art Martinez in Desert Storm standing next to Tom Rivers, both young, invincible, ready to change the world. One of them never made it home. The other spent decades honoring that sacrifice. Her satellite phone buzzed, text from Art. Coffee's getting cold, kid. When you coming home? Sarah smiled, typed back, next weekend, and I'm bringing the new Barrett. You need to see the upgrades. Art's response. About time. These mountains are getting too quiet. Someone needs to remind them what a real shot sounds like. That evening, reviewing lesson plans, her secure email pinged. Message from an unknown sender. Inside was a photograph. A young girl, maybe 14, sitting in a hospital bed, smiling. Below it, a single line of text in broken English. Katia is in remission. Thank you for sparing her father. Some debts are bigger than war. If you ever need Dmitry Volkov, you know how to find me." Sarah stared at the message, remembering that moment in the mountains, the Russian sniper in her crosshairs, the choice to engage a different threat instead. The choice that almost cost a child's life, but ultimately saved it in ways she couldn't have predicted. She typed a response. "Tell Katia her father is a good man, and tell him that warriors who remember their humanity are the ones who truly win." The reply came back within minutes. "He already knows, you taught him. Goodbye, American Angel." Sarah closed her laptop, looked out at Fort Bragg's training grounds, young soldiers learning the craft that had defined her life. Some would face impossible choices. Some would make mistakes. Some would carry wounds that never fully healed. If she did her job right, they'd understand that being a warrior meant more than pulling a trigger. It meant knowing when to show mercy. The mountains of Montana waited. Art waited with coffee and stories. And somewhere in Russia, a girl was alive because Sarah had chosen to be more than just a killer with a rifle. She'd chosen to be a warrior who remembered her humanity. 42 shots, 73 minutes, 24 lives saved. But the record that mattered most couldn't be measured in statistics. It was measured in coffee shared at dawn, in lessons taught to the next generation, in mercy granted when killing would have been easier. Sarah walked out into the evening air, her phone buzzing with Art's texts about cold coffee and mountains that needed watching. She smiled, because that's what warriors do. They never leave anyone behind, not in combat, not in memory, not in the frozen mountains where redemption waits for those brave enough to climb toward it. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes, the most important shot you'll ever take is the one you choose not to fire.